All right, so chapter 22, Mounce 22, is the second aorist active and middle indicative. The second aorist is a variation of just generally what's called the Eros tense. And we learned the imperfect already. The imperfect is a past time tense, right? It's past time. The aorist is also past time. So the fact that there are two should tell us that we have to consider the differences between them if they can both be used to indicate past time action. So we'll talk here in just a moment about why this is called the second aorist, but let's just talk about the basics first of all. The aorist is used for past time and indicates or portrays perfective aspect. What is perfective aspect? Perfective aspect is portraying the action as a bounded whole or in summary fashion without reference to the way it unfolds in time. You might think of it as kind of a snapshot of an action as opposed to, say, a motion picture of one. We would be using imperfective aspect or the imperfect tense in Greek if we were wanting to portray an action as going on continuously in the past, whereas the aorist would be used to say, just here's what happened. So, Mounce describes the semantics of the aorist as undefined aspect. And for this, the stem that is used for the second aorist is the aorist active stem. For the second aorist active indicative, the subject is going to be the agent of the verbal action. Subject performs the action of the verb. So he ate, they killed. These are the sorts of ways you would see the aorist active verb form translated. Now, let's talk for just a quick moment about why this is called a second aorist, okay? There is such a thing as a first aorist and a second aorist. These are different ways of forming the aorist tense. And let me just take a moment here to review some English grammar. And think about English verbs like this. We have to bake, okay? What is the present principal part for this verb? That would be the present participle. But which form of this verb would we use for the present tense? I bake, right? So we have ways of dividing up our verbs into principal parts. So this is what's called the present principal part. What's the past principal part? What do I use for just simple past time action? Okay, good. So it would be baked, right? Excellent. And we'll just stop with that for a moment, okay? Now, how about the verb to eat? What is the present principal part? Okay, good. So I eat, you eat, and the third person always adds an S to the present principal part, right? He bakes, he eats. The past is ate. Ah, very good. Very good. How about to make? The present is make. What's the past? Made. Okay, very good. So now you can possibly think of all sorts of verbs that fit one of these three patterns to form the past tense. Can you imagine? What's the pattern here? It's just adding a D, right? To the basic form. So, and in English, a lot of times it's a T sound or a D sound at the end. So give me some examples of some verbs that follow this first pattern. I'll give you a moment. It's kind of hard to be put on the spot like this, right? Wake. So he waked. Yeah. So that actually follows the second pattern, which is to change the vowel to form it a past tense. Eat becomes ate. See becomes saw. Yeah. Come becomes came. We're just changing the vowel, but we're not adding the T or D sound at the end. Jump. And then add the T sound at the end of jump. Jumped. Jumped. Okay? So, and then sometimes we actually change the vowel here. So like make becomes made. But what we could do just in English, now books don't do this, but if I were teaching English to a group of non-native English speakers and saying, okay, here's the English past tense. We have a first past, a second past, and a third past tense. These different ways of forming the past are not different kinds of past, right? They all are just past in terms of the semantics of the form. The only difference between these three is just how you form it. It's a difference in formation, but not a difference in meaning. Do you understand what I'm saying here? And that's what's going on with the difference between the second aorist and the first aorist. The first aorist is formed one way, and the second aorist is formed a different way, but they're both aorist past tense verb forms. They just have different formation patterns. Does that make sense? Now, the reason Mounce is starting with the second aorist when you would expect them to start with the first aorist is that the second aorist is going to be formed identically, for the most part, to the imperfects that you just learned. So there won't be any new things to learn except for the fact that there is a new stem to consider when you learn the second aorist. We're not using the present stem like the imperfect used. But all the other things that the imperfect used, the second aorist will use as well. Next chapter, we'll talk about how the the first aorist is formed. All right? So let's take a look here at the components of the form. First of all, there's an augment. Now, why is there an augment here? Because it's past time. Exactly. Second aorist is a past time tense, and that makes it a secondary tense, and so there will be an augment at the beginning of the verb form. If the verb begins with a consonant, our augment should be an epsilon. And if it begins with a vowel, then we will lengthen the vowel. And do keep in mind, diphthongs will sometimes lengthen the first member of the diphthong, and sometimes the diphthong will not. So be aware of that too. The stem that we're using here is the aorist active stem. This is the first time we've used the aorist active stem. Who remembers which principal part in the 6 columns the aorist stem will be found in? Number 3. That's right. That's right. There is no tense formative for the second aorist. When we get to the first aorist, we will learn a tense formative for those. But no tense formative here. The connecting vowel is the omicron and epsilon that you've come to know and love. And then the personal endings are the secondary active personal endings. So if you learned your imperfect tense well, for the imperfect active indicative, it's going to do all the same stuff, isn't it? Augment, no tense formative, same connecting vowels, the same secondary active endings. So they're going to look very similar, very similar. The one difference is the stem used. Imperfect uses which stem? The present stem, which is always column 1. That stem, strip away everything, connecting vowels, personal endings, you got the present stem. You'll see that on the imperfect. The third column will use the aorist stem. Will the aorist stem be the same as the present stem? Yes, it can be. That's right. That's right. Sometimes the aorist stem and the present stem are identical. But if it's a second aorist, its stem will not be the same as the present stem. Otherwise, it would look just like the imperfect. And we can't have that, can we? Greek has never tried to confuse anybody. Okay, so let's take a look at our example here. We have ebalis. And what does this consist of? Well, here's our component parts. Our augment, the the aorist active stem is the ball. Notice that in the present stem, it was what? It's that double lambda. So ball, double lambda. Aorist stem, single lambda. Just like the future had a single lambda. Where did that single lambda come from? Is that a modification of the present stem? No. What is the real root of ballo? It's ball. Remember, the real root is a single lambda form, isn't it? The present stem has been derived from the root but modified, hasn't it? The aorist stem is from the root unmodified. Okay, there's no tense formative, but there is a connecting vowel, and there's a secondary active personal ending. Which ending is the sigma? Ah, that's second singular, isn't it? And why do I have an epsilon here? Yes. Yes, epsilon before everything else, which means the omicron has to have some specified letters to precede. Mu and nu, right? Omicron before mu and nu. Okay, great. So, how would I translate ebeles? You threw. Simple past. What would the imperfect of that same form be? You were throwing. So here's that distinction between the aspectual value. If I want to portray an action, and I do use the word portray for a reason. In language, I have a choice as to how I portray action. It could be that an action took place over a long period of time. For example, my children sometimes would eat very slowly. And so we would try to get them to eat something that they didn't prefer, and it might take an hour. That's a long time to eat something. So the actual situation was, it was a rather ongoing process, wasn't it? But later, I could reflect back and say, yeah, last night, JP ate a hot dog. Now, my portrayal is a simple, summary snapshot of the view, even though I know that he took his sweet old time and it was ongoing for a good while, right? So aspect has to do with how the speaker wants to portray it. It doesn't have anything to do with inherently how it unfolded. So some actions happen quickly, in an instant, and I can choose to portray it as something ongoing, right? So he was catching, I think we talked about this the other day, when you catch something, that happens in an instant. But if somebody's running to catch the ball and I say he was catching the ball when he tripped, then I'm using the imperfective aspect to portray an action that's usually something that happens quickly and in an instant. So this is really how we're portraying the action for the hearer or the reader. All right. Let's take a look at the formation here then. For the most part, yeah, translators are trying to get across what would make sense to them, but they also are trying to be sensitive to what the Greek actually says. And since English and Greek don't have a verb form difference between imperfective and perfective aspect, right? It becomes difficult to bring that out, and so you end up having to use perhaps a few more words to get across an imperfective verb in Greek.
I'm reading in Greek and it says he does this, or in the English Bible would be he did this.
Mm-hmm.
It's we translate into past.
Yeah, that's really not an aspect issue. That's where the present might be being used for a past time action, and it's described as a historical present. Anyhow, let's take a look at the forms here real quickly. And you've got the persons, numbers, and then what's being attached to the stem. So augment plus the aorist active stem of balo is ebal. Our connecting vowels, of course, alternate between omicron and epsilon here. And then we learned these real personal endings the last chapter for the imperfect, and then they're modified here. This is one of the noticeable ones. The mu has to go to nu. So this is reflecting the me ct, my sci tie, right? So just an MST here. Mente, same. The final tau over here has to drop off. Greek likes to throw in the tau. And then nu tau is going to throw in the tau but leave the nu. And then these two will look the same. All right? So let's look at the forms here. There's really not a whole lot of significant changes when we get down to brass tacks. So let's read the forms. Ready? Ebelon, So that's ebalam. Mu can't be one of the final consonants, right? We only have 3 that can do that. The old sinner consonants. And so it becomes ebalon. Ebalis. It can stay just the way it is. And then ebalet becomes ebale. And that nu right here that you see is the movable nu. Not a personal ending nu. Do not mistake one for the other. Otherwise, you'll be trying to translate this, if you see the nu here, as I or they through. That's not what that means. He, she, or it through. Yes?
Will we ever see the movable nu show up?
Will you ever see it show up? Oh, yeah. You'll see it. Yeah, you see it all the time, actually. It's less likely to not see it. Excuse me.
Why is that? Like, why wouldn't we just put like the real ending of the nu instead of it being movable nu?
Well, because the nu is not a personal ending. It doesn't mark person at all. Its initial function is to break up a sequence of a vowel followed by another vowel. So it's like a becomes an when a vowel follows. But the nu, the movable nu, is used so frequently that it even occurs in situation where there's no vowel following. Okay, so yeah, just beware that.
Distinguish it from the first person singular and the third person plural is the epsilon.
Exactly. If this nu really were a personal ending, the connecting vowel would have to be an omicron. Since I have something that's not an omicron before that nu, it can't be the personal ending nu. Okay? All right, so next we have ebalamin. Say that with me, ebalamin. So we through, no changes here. Ebalate, y'all through, and then ebalon from ebalant. Throw in the towel, and we have ebalon. So everybody, ebalon is they through. First singular, third plural are the same, but they're the same for different reasons. Okay? Now, the difference here between the imperfect and the second aorist of balo is on the chart. Look at how these are the same and different. Ebalon on the left, I was throwing. Ebalon, pronounced exactly the same way, but spelled with a single lambda, I threw. You see how both of them have augments. Both of them have the same connecting vowel, same personal ending. It is only the stem that differs here. That is the only thing. Any verb that has a second aorist has to have a different stem than the present stem. Otherwise, the imperfect and the second aorist would be indistinguishable. And then there would be no way to portray an action differently. We just can't have that, can we? All right. So I'm not going to make us read all these, but you guys get the point here? Okay. Ebalete, double lambda, imperfect. You were throwing, ebalete, second aorist, you threw. Okay. Let's look at the second aorist middle indicative. The aorist is used for past time, even for the second aorist middle, and portrays perfective aspect. It's exactly the same as what we just read for the aorist, second aorist active. Okay, that is, we're portraying the action as a bounded whole, summary fashion. We're not thinking about how it unfolds in time. That's what the imperfect does. Mounce still describes this as undefined aspect. The stem that we're using for the second aorist middle is going to be the same stem that we use for the second aorist active. Okay, not a different stem. Both of these use the same stem. So we'll call it the aorist active stem, okay? And we will get to the aorist passives in a few chapters, and they are going to use a different stem. That'll be 6 in the principal parts chart. Stem number 6 column. This is why we're not calling this the second aorist middle passive, because the middle and the passive, like the future, will be distinct from each other. Right now, Any second aorist middle forms that you learn will be middle-only forms, or what Mounce calls deponent forms. And so you'll render them with a kind of active voice sense and with a simple past kind of translation value. So, for example, egenamein here is from genomai. What does genomai mean? Well, genomai by itself as a present form is I become, or I am becoming. Egenamein as the second aorist middle is I became. Just a simple past action there, all right? And of course, if you want to compare this to this form, egenamein, what's that? This is I was becoming. That's the imperfect middle indicative for singular. I was becoming. Okay? So you see both of these are past time. I became, I was becoming, but one is looking at it or portraying it as unfolding in time, and the other one as a simple, summary, unbounded event. Okay? The components of the form are pretty much what we've just seen. There's going to be one place where they differ. So same augments, same stem, aorist active stem, no tense formative, same connecting vowels, but we're here going to be adding the secondary middle passive endings rather than the secondary active personal endings. In our chart, okay, remember we have 4 quadrants. Which one is it? It's the bottom right. Okay, that one. That's the one we're looking at. Example, egenamein, which we just saw a second ago. Here's my augment. The aorist active stem of genomai is not gen, that's the present stem, it's gen. Gen. Connecting vowel, and the omicron is here because the personal ending we've chosen is a mu. And which person and number is main among the secondary middle passives? First singular. First singular. And so this is I became. I became. So we'll review the endings here. Yes?
So when we learn the second aorist passive, will that just be a aorist passive stem and then the second middle passive ending?
So when you learn the aorist passive, it's a little bit more complicated than that. So there's going to be a separate stem, so the aorist passive stem. There's going to be a tense formative for the aorist passive. There won't be a connecting vowel. And then the aorist passives are naughty. They don't use the secondary middle passive endings. They use the secondary active endings. That doesn't make sense, does it? How does a passive tense use active endings? That's the only one that does that. But if you'll remember that, and I'll jump up and down and scream about it when we get there, then it'll help you because all of the aorist passive things, we're going to learn aorist passive participles and infinitives, they're going to behave with endings that look active, even though you're going to translate them with passive meaning. Yeah, I know. But hey, it's your fault. Greek is not trying to confuse you. So if you're confused, it's all on you. Just kidding. Obviously, that's right. Okay, now, so here's the formation. Yes.
Real quick question. So for these, we'll translate them or parse them as middle deponent.
Right. Middle, or if you want to use Mounce's terms, middle deponent or just deponent. I do prefer middle myself, so if you say middle, then I'm happy. Okay, so just a reminder of what those secondary middle passive endings are. Again, MST, right? But just different letters and vowels. Main sata, metha, se, and ta. Okay? So, there is a method to the madness here. Here's the good news. Everything stays the same here except for one place. Where? Second singular. Why, oh why? Sigma is between 2 vowels. See that? So we'll get the intervocalic sigma dropping into Hades. And the epsilon and omicron will contract to oo. Okay? So let's take a look here. Aganamein, no problems. We get everything visible. Everybody, aganamein. So I became. Agenasa becomes agena, becomes agenu. Agenu. Agenata, happy, happy. Nothing changes. Agenamatha. So he, she, it became. We became. By the way, notice that the accent is on the omicron here. Why didn't it get to stay on the epsilon? Agenamatha. Does anybody remember your rule of accents way back at the beginning of Greek? You can only stress one of the last three syllables. So because this would have been a fourth from the final, it has to slide over one. Okay? So, ageniste, everybody? So ageniste is y'all became, and agenanta, they became. Easy peasy, huh? Okay? And then we can compare the imperfect middle indicative of genomai with the second aorist middle indicative of genomai. Notice that we have all the same augments on both sides, all the same personal endings on both sides, same connecting vowels. The only distinction is between gen and gen. Gen is the, which stem does the imperfect use? Present stem. There is no imperfect stem, right? Present stem. Gen is the aorist stem. Okay? They cannot be the same, or we cannot tell the difference between being or was becoming and became. I was going to say being and becoming, but that's different. Yeah. All right. So, let's just say these for fun, shall we? Agenamein. So I was becoming. Agenu. You were becoming. Agenata. He, she, it was becoming. Agenamatha. We were becoming. Ageniste. Y'all were becoming. Agenanta. They were becoming. And then, just with gen. Agenamein. I became. Agenu. You became. Agenata. He, she, it became. Agenamatha. We became. Ageniste. Y'all became. Agenanta. And that is they became.